What do you hate?
Enough.
This is episode 10 of the Atkins Lab
Version 4, because you keep changing your mind about how you want to start this thing.
Okay, we've started it. And
We've started this
It's
thing.
episode 10, which is pretty cool to get to episode 10.
It is.
I never thought we'd get past 2.
Oh, listen to you.
No, it's not. True. Actually, I'm thinking it was 100. It feels like 100. I've had so much fun
Oh
doing
my
this.
God. Okay, so we interviewed
Steph Fuller.
Steph Fuller, who is kind of the person I wish I was.
Oh, cool.
I wish I was Steph Fuller because her art, if I had the ability to be an artist, and I'm entirely too self-conscious to do it, I would do what she does. I love her work.
Yeah.
I love it. I want to do it. I want to be her. I want to like all of her. She goes, oh, I had this. I'm like, yes, that is what I want to have had that idea.
Yeah. What I love is her ability to go, oh yeah, I've been working on this for 5 years, and that's her. And she hasn't.
Yeah.
There's nothing's happened with it, but she's been working on the project.
Yeah.
Like, how do you do that? I mean, I'm probably a bad person to ask.
Well, you've been working on this business. This has been your project for the last 35 years.
And how long for the boat?
No, let's not talk about the boat.
That's the third boat, though.
Yeah, okay. But yeah, no, she's extraordinary and and young and beautiful and stupidly talented and it's kind of depressing. Yeah, she's amazing, and I think she's very undervalued at this juncture in little old Adelaide. I don't know what's going to kick her out and make her go.
I think there's a
uber queen of the world.
There's a real path happening, and it just takes a long time on that path.
Yeah.
There's no overnight success, I think, in visual art. I think if it's happened, it's pretty rare in art in general. It's incredibly rare. I think she's just on a great path, and because she's on this steady path, and her show's professional, and she's getting there, that she will keep going, and she'll keep going and become more and more important to the world's art scene.
Yeah, she does beautiful stuff, and it's interesting because I think there's, I know that the podcast is about speaking to a range of different people, but I think there's something for everybody to learn out of each one, and I think that all the people who are right now going, well, I'm a baby photographer or I'm a wedding photographer, what am I going to get? Just listen to it. Like, you will get so much out of it. It has nothing to do with what you do and everything to do with what you do, because it's photography, and it's how she sees, and it's how she thinks about what she does, and how she, has to deal with that balance between what's achievable technically and what she's trying to achieve emotionally and in her head as to what it is. And also, like, the hours and hours and hours and hours she spends just doing the same thing over and over to try and get what she wants out of it.
Exactly.
Which is some form of insanity, right?
No, it's cool. And I reckon she's the guest with the best background yet.
Yeah.
And all
pretty cool.
All the stuff. So, yeah, you got to have a look at the...
and I'm going to overlay some of her work as you talk.
So Vimeo and YouTube version is worth having a glance at. We will have the images in the show notes in a gallery as well. Is that the way we're going to do it?
Yep.
Not that we speak specifically about images like we did with Ragni. We will, hint to the work. So if you do want to check it out on YouTube or Vimeo, that's a nice thing to do.
Yep.
So anything else we want to say to our lovely listeners?
I don't know. Take some photos.
Take some photos.
Place an order.
Place an order?
Place an order.
That's good advertising.
If everybody listening to this show placed one 8x10, we would have 3 more 8x10 orders.
And if there were people watching the video,
we would have one more.
No, the podcast had
I now edit this bitch for like 2 hours in a
We've
minute.
had over 1,000 downloads of the audio stream. So
a week.
Yeah, a week. So like just 1,010.8s. We could do that.
1,010.8s?
Are you yawning again?
I'm yawning again. I'm sorry. Yeah, 1,010.8s would be nice. Haven't had that in a little while.
No, that's the school stuff because the schools are not schooling.
Schools are,
although they're started up again, and we're starting to see the first schools were shot this week here in South Australia.
Yep.
So we're going to start to see that work, and it's very cool.
And we've got some replacement. We had a couple of frames go out of stock, and we've got some replacements for that.
Oh, you've been having a look at that, have you?
Yeah, it's this amazing mob in New South Wales, and they go out like you go, I want this wood. in a frame molding, and they go, okay, well, we've got one of those trees out the back, and they walk out there, no doubt with a beard, and they hack the tree down.
What's a beard for?
I don't know. I feel like there's a beard somewhere in there. And they hack the tree down, and then they grind it up into like frame shaped.
They don't
shit.
grind it. They
Whatever.
form it. They plane it.
Yeah, whatever. And then they send it to us. It's kind of glorious.
It's cool. No, I did have a look at the moldings, and I did look at the pricing, which is a little on the scary side.
Yeah,
so
we will have to put a surcharge on, I think.
yeah, well, we'll have a look at it and see how it fits in with everything that's going on. Yeah, there you go.
God, how lame are we today? Why is that? Is that because it's Saturday?
No,
You're just
because the weather is
exhausted?
really scary.
Yeah, because what you can't see behind this window curtain
Thing,
crap we've got up on there is the world is coming to an end.
No, it looks like it's wicked weather. It feels awful, and I don't know what the
awful.
story is.
I don't know. I have to go and pick the dogs up in a minute with their hairdos. Shut up.
Are they going to
I
have...
saw that face. Listen.
Can't you cut it yourself and do
No,
a nice job?
I cannot. It's entirely too hard.
Yeah, but then they get this helmet head look. It's awful.
Listen,
It's ridiculous.
as a man who has not
Had a haircut.
had a haircut in how
3
long,
months?
I don't think you can be complaining.
I know.
Yeah, good. So, and then Jo wants to go to Savers and get some crap that she can then put through my sewing machine and make vaguely less crap. I
Well,
don't know.
look, lovely people.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, there's one other thing I wanted to say, which
What?
I want to put out to the audience. This week,
Buy another 8x10.
This week,
No.
yeah, besides that, I did a virtual lab tour with a group of people, right?
Yes.
And
so,
it went really,
do you
really
think
well.
people want that?
I don't know. But
Do people want that?
I would love
Do
to.
you
yeah.
want a
Yeah,
like?
but it was an interactive one where we
yeah,
took,
yeah. So we could do
but
like
how-
an invite only one.
Yeah, I know. My question is, like, if everyone wants one.
No. Like we would do an invite, like we do it on the Book of Faces or something.
Yeah. Like
and,
okay,
and everybody can ask questions.
and if
And
there's
I'll,
about 10 people, then the questions can be asked and answered nicely.
Yeah.
Any more than that, I think it would be
Well,
a bit of a silly broadcast type of thing.
depends on how many questions there are.
But
They
it was
might not be
good
the same.
because
But
we
I
got-
could be the chooser of the question. You just do the,
You could.
and I could film it.
You could. And the feedback from the audience who saw it, which was a school, a group of students in secondary, not secondary, but tertiary students doing.
You got them to talk?
Yeah, they were asking a lot of questions in the feedback. So I called the teacher up and said, "Hey, how did it go?" Or the lecturer, and she said it was excellent. They liked the back and forward. They liked the interest we had in what we do and how much we love what we're doing. The machinery. They were amazed at some of the stuff that we have running. So, yeah, it was a good little introduction to how we work here. Which means, like, the problem is anyone in Adelaide can walk in, we show them around, have a lovely look and a chat and a cuppa.
Yeah, but no one can come to
But you
Adelaide
can't do
at
that
the moment.
remotely.
No.
And we've got so many clients now, interstate and internationally, that I really want to be able to do this
Yeah.
for. So I think we have a format that's going to work.
And even just regional people, like people in the middle of
Yes.
in Whoop Whoop.
Yep, by parks, by the telescope. we
Or
got some out
people
there.
in America. We've got
We
so
have
many American
Americans.
clients at the moment,
Yeah.
which is, amazing and terrifying.
Yeah, for them. Dealing with us in Australia.
I know.
Because everything gets delivered by
Well,
kangaroo
and
over
because
here.
I feel like
Kangaroos get things dirty because their
Yeah.
pouches aren't the
and
cleanest.
we're probably a bit more casual in our service standards here than the Americans are used to.
You think
so
so?
I think so. I think Americans want a higher level of service. They want more formal
Yeah.
conversations, and that brings me to Akimbo.
Oh, yes.
That's Seth,
Seth Golden.
which I don't know. I feel like he's probably a pretty big douchebag, but that was a very interesting episode. You got your show notes ready?
Oh, right. Yeah, I'll make a note.
About how you don't have to have like this mega Uber startup getting heaps of, like that podcast episode was really interesting about how you can really just do something that you have a market for, that people are interested in, and it can work, and it doesn't have to be the second coming of Christ every time.
No, it just has to be a minimum viable audience. I
yeah.
think that's what it was. You have
You have to do a thing,
you don't need
and
everybody.
you have to do a thing in a way that people want that thing over other people's thing. It's not that fucking complicated.
It's got to be about you. It's not about not so much about what you're doing, but it's about how you do it and how you do it
Because
differently.
there's definitely, and I don't know how other people feel, but I feel as an old person,
Old?
which means everyone, the three people that are listening are all under 25. But I feel like,
Whippersnappers?
yeah, let me tell you, you under 25s, as an old person, I feel a bit like, well, I didn't reinvent the wheel, and I'm not like a founder. Like all the cool people are founders.
They found.
Like they founded a fucking business
yeah.
that made them shit tons of money, and we don't have that. And so there's an element of.
Can't even
I
find
probably
anything.
listen to too much
Can't even
startup
find my
cultural
socks.
stuff. Oh God. But it's just that thing where I'm just like, oh my God, have I got enough money to retire on? No, I do not. What am I going to do?
Yeah.
I have to do something for the next 50 years because I'm never going to be able to retire. And so what's that going to be? Well, it can't just be something I hate.
Yeah. No, you got to do something you love, and I think the message that Seth is always putting forward is don't get hung up on what you've done and what what the past was. He said you've just got to keep seeking for opportunities.
Yeah, and that it was just a slightly more relaxed view on that stuff instead of this kind of.
Oh yeah, totally.
We all have to be influencers and we all have to be the best of the best and we blah 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 blah. Which I think photographers fall into that a lot, where they're like, I want to be an influencer. I want to be like, Barefoot or Kristen Cook, Ollie, all these big swinging dick guys, except obviously Kristen Cook, no dick swinging. But you get the picture, right?
Yes.
That whole thing is, it's nice for them, but that's not the vast majority of people and what we do.
Yeah,
and we don't have investors, we don't have like money from that perspective,
Yeah.
and so we're not doing it for that reason. We don't have like a second income stream from this secret squirrel business over here that we do. Do you know what I mean? So like there's this aspect of this, like, are we actually missing out on something, and is there some tricky dicky thing that we should be doing?
So what
that other
Seth
people
does is he
aren't
brings
doing?
it down to that understanding that that's not reality.
No.
And he actually disses influencers a bit, not specifically the ones we've just mentioned.
No,
but
no.
He's dissing the idea that you pile up on Instagram followers and off you go.
Yeah. It's an interesting chat. Anyway, that was good.
So that's good. So we'll give a link to it in the show notes. But what you really need to do now is sit down, buckle up, and look forward to listening to.
And look at the videos. The videos she
Yeah.
does, so cool.
Oh yeah, Steph. Go to her website at least. She's got some little. What she call them, a little class?
Yeah,
art
I think it's
class?
under classes.
Art classes.
They're really,
Please
really
have a
sweet.
quick look. It's so beautiful, and even though you know how it's being done, like a magic
It's
trick.
made me want to
but-
get another camera, which I still don't have a camera other than my fucking iPhone, but whatever. It's fine. I'm married to a photographer. It means I don't get a camera ever. How's the guilt? Is it working yet?
Whatever.
Yeah, and I'd like to say to the viewing public, all three of you, plus the one on the video, none of you fuckers have helped me at all. I put a call out on the Instagram and said, come and help me get a camera. And nobody said jack.
Yes, well, that's bad luck, isn't it?
Probably because they're not listening to what I say at all on Instagram or anything else.
Well, let's let these people
Right.
go to Steph.
Shut up. Yes.
So hey, let's get on with this, huh?
Yeah, let's.
So I'm on the call here on the Super Skype call with someone who's clearly in outer space. I am so impressed. Are you hanging off the space station there, Steph?
Oh, can you tell?
You're off the International Space Station. This is so awesome. This is Steph Fuller, Weld. Weld, I'd like you to meet Steph Fuller. She's an Adelaide-based visual artist who photography is your thing, isn't it? That's your medium?
Yeah. Never forayed into anything else.
No? Never?
No, can't draw, can't paint. And, once I discovered photography, I wasn't going to waste my time, further learning how bad I was at stick figures. So, yeah, I've been sticking at it for a while.
So you did was it a Bachelor of Visual Art or a Master's? Have you done?
Yeah, both of those.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, a good couple of years ago now, long in the past. But, that was a real turning point in, like, I always was interested in photography, but took me a while to click between pursuing it as a visual artist and pursuing it sort of more commercially. And I'm really glad that I enrolled in the arts, the Bachelor of Visual Arts, to sort of clock that, and have, never looked back, and really enjoying that freedom to make the pictures I want to make and all that jazz and travel through space.
So you were, with having a bachelor and a master's, that's what gets you on the space station. I better make a note of that, because I've always wanted to be an astronaut. And
yeah, you don't need to do astrophysics or any of that jazz. You just need an arts degree.
An arts degree, and was that at University of South Australia?
That's the one. Yeah, and I went
Awesome.
straight from high school. I didn't have a gap year, and just went straight through it, and then had a bit of a, deep breath and take some time. But yeah, just sort of marched on through.
So you knew your stuff. You knew you wanted to do this. Why? How were you so sure? And where did photography fit into that surety?
I think so. I discovered photography in sort of mid-high school. I'm sure you can relate to this. My dad bought a new camera, a Lumix, which was only like less than 10 megapixels, but at the time it was amazing. And I just kind of adopted it, and he never really got to use it at all. And yeah, realized how much I loved making images. And I think because I enjoyed it so much, I didn't really question anything from that point on. And yeah, enrolling in a visual arts degree, specializing in photography, just made a whole lot of sense. So I just kind of was propelled forward through that. And yeah, I mean, trying to make it as an artist is pretty hard, but I've just run with it.
I mean, we'll get to that side of it. But did you have a B plan at all? Was there another path? I mean, other than you talked about commercial photography.
Yeah. I mean, I think in the beginning I thought I'd be doing more, work my way up to weddings and, shooting more photographs of people. I thought I'd be doing,
right.
Rather than my, sometimes dead subject matter and insects and all of that. But yeah, I think not really. I didn't really think about, having the practicality of having a plan B. I was interested in, I've been using Photoshop for a while, so I think there was a bit of maybe I could do graphic design, but very flippant. So yeah, not really.
Yeah. And I mean, you said that, making a living as a visual artist is it's probably the biggest challenge of all, which means you've got to have some sort of a plan B for your income. You've got to get work elsewhere. And a lot of people have said to me that that's quite a freeing thing to take the pressure off of your photography. So where do you find yourself supplementing the photography with an income? What are you doing now?
Yeah, I did there was a lot of retail for a long time. Right. And now I'm working for Sala Festival, and my role keeps changing, projects coordinator at the moment. So that means that I can still shoot what I want because it's not the sole thing feeding me. So yeah, I definitely agree with that sentiment.
Oh, that's cool. And Sala Festival's a South Australian Living Artists Festival. It's it's a wonderful thing that runs over a month, is it?
Yeah, that's right. Yep, celebrating the living artists in South Australia for a whole month. So it's a great, relevant place to be working. So it's
like that is parallel, isn't it, really?
Yeah, I really lucked out. So it's great.
Yeah, and I suppose the retail side of what you did and have done has probably set you in good stead for the side of being an artist that not every artist is comfortable with, and that's dealing with people and pushing yourself out there. And because you have to fight to get yourself known, don't you?
Yeah, it doesn't remedy imposter syndrome, but it is really good for having but having that confidence to talk to people and talk about my work. I think it's definitely helped. So yeah.
Imposter syndrome, huh? That's a tough one, isn't it?
Yeah, you've just got to befriend it early, I think, because it doesn't go away. Yeah, one of those things.
So your work, like I'm just looking at the earth behind you and the sentiment of black and space and otherworldliness, that's Proximal Orbit, which I mentioned is one of my all-time favorite shows that I've seen. You've got the sense of of play, but you're also looking at things, it's an imposter, you're photographing things, it's an imposter what you've done and you've obviously got a fascination with astronauts and space but you've created your own side of that. Where did that come from?
Yeah, I have thought about this a lot, and I think there's multiple things at play. I used to shoot natural light and swore I'd never shoot with artificial light. I'm sure we've all been there. And when I was in either second or third year of my undergrad degree, I discovered speed lights and was particularly taken by, if you hold it from above and shoot down on an object, it kind of looked like it was about to be beamed up by a UFO. So I really loved that aesthetic. And I think I just watched that dreadful remake of War of the Worlds with Tom Cruise, and it was just all sort of making a lot of sense. And so I sort of started to really enjoy that cold white light, which just lends itself to, the light that you get outside of the atmosphere. And I think the other aspect that sort of comes into play is that by using those sort of common objects and casting them in this new context, I felt that I really was playing a significant role in the images that I was making. I think I have a bit of a hang up about photographing things that are already beautiful or already significant. And so that was another sort of aspect that played in. And the other thing is that I just really would love to go to the space station and, float around out there. And this was my way of participating in that journey and that exploration and, being on the final frontier and being a part. So without doing astrophysics.
So you're are you science nerd or Bowie fan? Like you know what I mean? There's a romance about space from one side, and there's a romance from space. So where do you fit in that?
I'm definitely more the Bowie, the emotional. It's the
gotcha.
feeling. It's not. I couldn't. I sometimes I forget what NASA stands for. That's so embarrassing. But it's not the science. It's the feeling. It's the emotion of it. And yes, a lot of Bowie, a lot of Radiohead, and Zimmer. Always Zimmer.
Okay.
Interstellar. Big fan. Yeah. It's the emotion of it. Yeah.
I got one for you. Have you heard of John Roderick and the Long Winters, The Commander Thinks Aloud?
No, I have not.
Oh, beautiful. Hey, this is the first time I actually may have a little bit of cred here with such a cool young person as yourself. So you've got to listen to it. It was a song he made after the Challenger disaster, and it is so touching. It is just beautiful. And, so I think I get the romance from that side, and I've got the bit of the space nerdy thing as well. I think everyone has it in them somewhere. I do. And that beautiful Sagan quote about the little marble, I think that really helps, frame it. And you've got it behind you. You've got it going on behind you. Which is cool. So the black's not a goth thing. It's just a fascination with the space, right?
Yeah, that's it.
So I noticed on your website with the lockdown stuff, you had some little projects to help people think about the way you work, and it's kind of a great lead in to what you're doing. Tell us about that. I mean, I know where it came from. We're all trying to help people and make people feel good, but what you've done there is it made me smile. I mean, I know how you make your stuff, but it gave me a smile from ear to ear. So just tell us how you did that and why you did that and all that.
Yeah, I'd forgotten about that for a few minutes. It was sort of the start of the lockdown, and I think, I had a bit of, where can I channel my energy, and, you feel obligated to do something. I think people find that stuff interesting when you can package it quite simply and in a way that's accessible, because I was using my phone to shoot those little examples. So, I don't know. I think I just wanted to share and show people that they can do those things and see those things. Like, I know, yes, you're one of your top shows, Proximal Orbit, when people coming out or, getting in touch afterwards, they say, I'm looking at things differently now. Or one friend says that her and her partner, they call things a Steph moment, and one of them will have one of these moments and they'll say it to the other one and they'll know what the other is talking about after going to the show. So it was like, well, you can generate them yourselves. You can, discover little worlds within, wet concrete or salt thrown on a kitchen bench. So, and I have had some people, I think people have been quite busy and not everyone's, got the time to go and fiddle around, but I've had people sort of show what they've made, and, someone made a moon out of their kitchen table and all the textures, worked together really well. Someone just had a rendered wall, but the light from the side made it all glittery. It's amazing just seeing other people run with that same way of seeing. So yeah, I'm glad I put it out. Thanks for reminding me that.
I think it was smart. It's and I remember from the artist talk at Proximal Orbit, and you were talking about, you know, you're discovering these little things. One thing to discover it, another thing to turn it into such a big show and such a comprehensive professional show. That I'm always curious about the way people decide to consume spaces with their exhibition work. Not spaces out of space, but, you know, the room that they're showing the work in. And I think art's moved to a point, visual art has moved to a point now where you need to do a little bit more than make a nice idea and a nice picture. And you need to have an artist statement too that talks about it, but it goes beyond that. You need to attack the space and take your visitors on a journey. And that use of the space was really clever. So how did you go about it? Were you offered that space? Tell us about that.
I applied for that space, and it was because that, you know, so it was at the wonderful Praxis Art Space. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, thank you to the team there. They're fantastic. And I applied for that space because you sort of walk in and there's no windows, you're just immersed. And that was the quality that came up the most in my planning, or sort of, you know, what I wanted for this show is I wanted people to feel surrounded and immersed, and not have those, you know, not be able to look out a window and be reminded that actually you're in the middle of Adelaide and, oh, look at that person walking their dog. You know, I wanted it to be really all-consuming. So that's why I applied for that gallery space. And yeah, I was very fortunate that the team were keen, and there was a lot of collaborative problem solving around how to, you know, make it as dark yet still be able to see the work. And because it was only one light box, so there were challenges there. And painting walls black, that was a big ask. I still can't believe we did that because they were some big walls. And I think there was a lot of apprehension around just how big that space is, but remembering that when you bring the work in, the work needs breathing room. And, you know, like I remember having one work just was the only work for quite a large chunk of the gallery, and, you know, feeling those things through as we went through that process. So, it was a really great experience, and I feel like I was really fortunate in that what I envisaged for that show was what we ended up with. So, yeah, fantastic fun.
Did you find yourself, you had a fair idea of what you were going to put in there. Did you find yourself editing based on the space, or did you have enough time from knowing the space to say, okay, I need these pieces to go here and I need this? And which way did it happen, the chicken or the egg?
It was pretty, in terms of the amount of work that I had, I think I only dropped one or two pieces, and that was more to do with the, you know, whether I thought they were at the same level as the rest of the work. Otherwise, I just got pretty lucky. Like I had a couple of little ones that fit nicely on one slightly smaller wall, and then the rest were all mostly the same size, spread across. And you know, how much do you spread? That's, you know, it worked out pretty well that way. I had two prints that I'd framed back in a grad show that were still part of that body of work that worked perfectly in the front room, and they had white frames, which I'd forgotten till the last minute. So the front gallery was white walls, so that kind of just all worked out amazingly. These are the things no one tells you. Oh. So yeah, it was just kind of whatever made the most sense was what happened, and yeah, whichever works needed the most breathing room got it, and yeah, it just kind of worked out.
And did you have a lot of time for that bump in where you could play around with that? Was there enough breathing room with the space?
I think so. God, it's going back a little while.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. That's unkind of me, isn't it?
All good. The team's professionalism was really, you know, made sure that we were, you know, hitting the right milestones at the right time. But it didn't feel rushed, and I was pretty keen to I think I downloaded a diagram pretty early on and was trying to, you know, drag and drop things on Photoshop thinking they were to scale. So I sort of had an idea about which works, you know, had a dialogue and what went where pretty early on. So I think that just kind of worked out quite well as in the scheme of things. I don't think there was any real overhauls about, oh no, this is all going over the other side. I think Gabby and I were pretty on the same page about what would go where.
Yeah, it seemed to be. I mean, it just felt like there was someone who really knew what they wanted to do and knew how to run that space. And I know, getting a miniature of the walls and scale mapping the whole thing out, you can do that. Maybe if you didn't have a lot of bump in time, that's, a good way to go. But there's nothing like standing in front of the piece and going, I remember the discussion when I came around early, you were worried about some of the blacks versus the black in the wall versus the black in the frame. They were working. And look, these are last minute things, because there's no such thing as a black. I mean,
no. I've learned that now.
Well, you knew that, didn't you? Surely. But it scared the life out of you when you were there.
The frame and the print, though, was just so many things. Yeah.
Yeah. And some blacks not being like super rich, having been. I mean, my first word that comes to the tongue is insipid, but none of them were insipid, but they were just not as full as a rich black. They're important because they tell another part of a story. You need that to show a bit of detail, because a full rich black, you just lose detail completely. But it was very effective with the pools of light falling on these dark images, and you felt like you had to move around carefully so you didn't, what's in this space kind of. And that was what you wanted, wasn't it? It works to emerge out the darkness.
Yeah. I didn't want the walls to be apparent at all.
Yeah, well, it worked. And you played with projection as well, I noticed. And the crew also put a brand new projector up for you, which was just amazing, wasn't it?
They are the best. Absolutely the best, yeah. That was my first time ever experimenting with a projected work. So, yeah, that was a fantastic opportunity. So I'm forever grateful. Thank you, Patty. Thank you, Mark. And yeah, seeing people walk through, tying back to that whole idea of the exhibition as a whole thing, watching people walk through that work that was projected from the ceiling to the floor and sort of observe the work on their person was another thing again. So yeah, it was a lot going on.
There's a whole experience. And I did very much I thought the little projection room, which showed you, I mean, it wasn't the same as the videos of you making the images, but it was like the lunar lander coming down to the surface of the moon, or giant-legged creatures from some horror film or something. And they were, you could see how you made them. They kind of revealed a little bit behind the curtain, but they were delightful. That idea of the space moving into a really dark room, sitting down and feeling that a bit more of your process. That was great. Did you learn, you obviously haven't worked with motion much before. Is that something that was hard to pick up and get into?
Yeah, it felt very ambitious, that work. I'd actually finished that the year before and exhibited it on its own, just the video itself. Very uncharted territory, and still is for me, but I quite enjoy it. I think it sort of feels, in the context of that work, it sort of filled the need where photography couldn't quite capture something that had motion. So in this context, it's the shooting star and the jolt of seeing it move. I couldn't quite recreate that with a photograph. So that's actually the push that got me into experimenting with moving image. And that work in particular was actually inspired, this is where the cheesiness comes back in, was inspired by those sort of montages that you see on YouTube with the inspirational music in the background of those little clips from the ISS, where you see the Earth spinning for 30 seconds and then it cuts to someone doing a moonwalk or, the cargo ship docking. It was sort of my take on, oh, well, I can make one of those because I can go to space too. So that's what that was sort of modeled off, that sort of, 5-minute long, here, come into space, see some things. So that was the origin of that little one.
Yeah, it worked. It was delight. It was a delightful experience, especially when you realize what you're looking at and you saw you're zooming over a jumper or a piece of fabric or something like that. Wonderful little metaphors for the way we look at things, and also a metaphor. And I think probably considering lockdown and considering how much isolation everyone's been in, you start to look. We all want to look at bigger things and look for bigger things. But when we look inside and look below our feet and look on the shelf and get really close to things, it's really interesting, isn't it? There's so much to be seen and found.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that someone called me out before, or didn't call me out, but had a moment where I realized that not everyone spends as much time lying on the floor as I do. Like at some point it occurred to me that it was an odd thing to do. And yeah, just kind of like I love snails and anything that sort of gets me thinking from normal scale down to this focus on, something a lot smaller. And I think about once you start thinking about something that small, everything else is massive. And I think that's where the connection back to the vastness of space sort of comes from. But yeah, I love it. I think it's fascinating it's just bug watching on one sense, but I think finding those textures and different roles of objects that you are surrounded by and that are completely mundane is fun.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the space imagery is so familiar to us that, it kind of triggers that, and you go, "Oh, I know what I'm looking at." And I go, "No, I don't." Steph's done it again. So, you obviously work practically. You're working with macro gear and macro lenses and that kind of stuff, and torch light or strobe light, or what are you working with for some of this stuff?
Yeah. So I have to work digitally, obviously, because it's so precise. And sometimes it's a torch, sometimes it's a strobe. Most of Proximal Orbit was strobe light, but now I'm just kind of torch in the pocket and playing around and getting that instant visual feedback about, what direction and, what looks right. And filling, I think Proximal Orbit in particular, every image took, at least one session, but sometimes multiple sessions where I'd shoot and have I achieved that, iconic composition, mimicking a NASA photograph, or no, something about that's not quite right, go back and reshoot, these very staged images. I'm starting to relax a little bit and be a little bit more fluid in my working, but they were quite meticulous and not the best gear. I'll be completely honest. I'm not how you're saying science or Bowie. I'm not a tech head. Like I tweak until it's right again. I can't go, oh yes, I shot that on, this shutter speed, and I never retain that. So I'm not a techie, so don't ask me too many questions.
No, I'm not going. I'm not. Frankly, that stuff really bores me. I just know I'm trying to be the person listening and thinking, well, they might be curious about those sorts of things. It was interesting when I interviewed Ragni from Denmark a few weeks ago. She was using. She discovered it wasn't as an Olympus system that allowed you to light paint and live see the results build as you paint with light.
Wow.
And, little things like that can really change the way you work, and it certainly changed her way, because light painting used to be, especially on the film days, well, you'd have days to see whether you did it right and to learn that next step. But the instant feedback that you get from the way you work, especially when you're close focusing and objects and working with trained daddy long leg spiders and all that kind of stuff as well. So tell us, I noticed that you were working on an exhibition, 2 Minutes to Midnight, that was put together. Is that a dark title? I mean, we've used Minutes to Midnight as a term for how close we are to nuclear holocaust in the past. Is it along those lines? I couldn't kind of draw it out.
Yeah, so Steph Sivich came to me with this idea for an exhibition, and myself and Amelia Kasimovich. And it is what it sounds like. It's that 2 minutes to midnight is a reference to the doomsday clock. And we were sort of brainstorming for this exhibition late 2019. So it was before COVID and before the fires. So it took on, new significance as time went on. And the exhibition itself, unfortunately, was postponed. It was meant to open on the 1st of April. And that was
April
right.
Fool's Day?
Yeah, I know. Not a joke.
No, was that on purpose to?
No, I think it was just when it was the Wednesday or whatever it was. It was meant to be at Felt Space. That was just when it landed. And yeah, so that got, had the rug pulled out from under us. But yeah, making that work was a nice challenge because it wasn't space, and I wasn't sure if I could, start with a concept. And I mean, it sounds so redundant, but to start with a concept and work to it instead of just going with what I already liked to make. And, I think my space stuff is really not political. It's just, it's quite fanciful to me because it's, I'd really love to go to space and here's my way of getting there. Whereas, this exhibition 2 Minutes to Midnight was more about, fear and what could happen. And yeah, while I was making the work, it was what is happening because the country was on fire. So that was a really interesting and I think sort of formative experience to go through. Like, I've never really made work in anger before. So that was, quite interesting. And I feel really weird and conflicted that I've made work that I'm really excited by and not quite sure when it's going to be shown because, everything's been postponed. So I don't know when that'll be released into the world, but I'm excited to eventually show it.
So you wouldn't revisit it considering the conditions? You wouldn't, like, it's a package, you've finished with it and you're on to your next project?
I think I could pick it up again. I was doing some portraits of eucalyptus trees that doesn't really have an end point, but when COVID started, I just wasn't in the right space to be making it anymore. So I think I might be able to revisit it, but it's on pause for now. And if we get more space to exhibit or something like that happens, I've got enough work for the show, but maybe I think it's got legs and I could come back to it. But the work's made for exhibition. We just couldn't open, or install.
So you said it was made in anger, which is, your work, in my understanding, has been quite optimistic, and I always think of space stuff as optimistic. And you look at all the astronauts and the reason for the space programs, and it is a really positive thing. With some of your early work, I noted back, I think it was a wash, which would be one of your early series. Is that, that's from a place that doesn't seem particularly comfortable.
No. That work was made after the loss of a relative to suicide. So that was definitely from quite an intense place. But not anger. It was just it's hard to describe it being so distant from that time, but I think it was more about that inward feeling and how ordinary spaces felt completely imbued with new tones and feelings, and almost like vacant spaces, like the empty space in a room felt like heavy, it felt like full. So that was an interesting time, and probably the first time I was really making work that was a response to something. So I guess you're right, I have made work in response to something, but that was a more inward kind of reflection, I think. You
can feel it in the work. It's very singular and quite lonely, and I can imagine. I think it does speak very strongly that there is something more happening in the images, and it's great that you've been able to put that together. It's particularly, at a point in your career where I don't know when it was within everything, but it can't have been long after graduation, I expect.
No, it was between finishing my undergrad and completing masters. It was in between there. Yeah. Cool. So I was still studying.
Cool. So how are you feeling now that things are easing here in South Australia? And you said you were having difficulty at the beginning of lockdown with not sure what to do, and then you made those little pieces to sort of challenge people and show people how you work. How are you feeling now, and where are you headed?
Well, I've admitted something that well, not on purpose, but I have a body of work. This will be quite exciting for you, Paul. My biggest undertaking to date, I haven't mentioned it yet, but...
Hang on, let me just stop you there. Proximal orbit, how many years did it take you to put that together?
Okay, well, I wasn't working on it all the time, but it was... but it was 5 years, I think, between making the first works and so yeah, that was big. This is bigger than
big. It's bigger.
Yeah, this is big too. It's a different way of working. It doesn't have a title yet, but it's a series of works that, and this is the other thing. I thought I would eventually move away from space, but I started doing more space, and it's different space. It's not, every image is hardly, it's not staged. It's stuff that I've come across. It's looking at our coast and finding space in the, at the beach that you think of as, sunny yellows and watery blues, and it's not. I'm finding amazing things, and I'm just shooting in a very haphazard sort of way and not discovering which images are really imbued with, mystery until I come back and turn them black and white and darken them. And it's really, I'm very excited by it. It's really fun. Yeah. You get some of these grains of sand just drop away into the dark, and then some of them, rise up and they're your sky full of stars. And there's so much there. Once I started it, there's just so much. So I've been shooting that since late 2019. It sort of had to get put on the shelf when I was doing the 2 minutes to midnight work. But now that I'm in lockdown, essentially, I've been able to revisit the thousands and thousands of images that I've taken. And yeah, currently, once I finish work, I stay on my computer to sort through. I'm trying to narrow it down to 100 images, and it's proving very difficult, but in the best way. So yeah, I actually have plenty that I'm excited to be working on, but just nothing that I can put out yet.
No. So your process is to you gather the ideas there, right? And then you start gathering stuff. Are you going back through a back catalogue, or did you go out and shoot like a mad person?
It used to be that I'd think of, especially when I was really borrowing from NASA photographs for compositions and whatnot. A lot of the time it's, I want to, I've really got to pull towards this image, maybe a sketch, and I'd, think about what the object was, like, okay, this is going to be done by a snail, or a daddy longlegs is going to be the rover. And it would have a lot of forethought, especially when you have to ask someone, can I put a spider on you? And, can this person hold the light? And, blah, blah, blah. Thank you, Phoebe. That was great for modeling for that. I couldn't have done it. But yeah, it's changing now. I think I'm enjoying now having I know I'm looking for space, but I don't know what composition. I don't know what it is. And I think I said before that I have a real hang up about not influencing a scene and it not being my work. And I think I get around this because even I don't know if an image is going to be, a good resulting image until I've, turned it almost all the way black and then brought it back a little bit until a comet pops out, or something like that. So it's an entirely different way of working for me, which is exciting, and it means that I am much more productive. So I have been shooting like a mad woman. I think I've got 15 folders of beach shots, and some of them I went to 3 different beaches in one day, and every time I'll focus on something different, and there's a plethora of beach pics. So it's a curatorial approach to the work where you're going, and you're seeing stuff emerge out of the body that you've created, and you're seeing these pieces and you're drawing the parallels and the stories out of it. Because I suppose there's a limited amount of NASA photos. I mean, there might be tons of copies or stuff that we haven't seen of the real aliens, the Area 51 stuff and all that. But there's, we've seen these competitions. We know them. And you got to run out of them at some stage. Until Elon gets up there and starts photographing things, or whoever. I haven't done the car yet. I'll have to get a little Hot Wheels out and, pop a snail in there or something. thing.
They're
But yeah,
lucky snail.
but yeah, you're
It's fascinating. It really is. And of course the beach, it's a littoral zone and an edge zone between two places. The ocean is a different world. The earth is a different world. And the atmosphere is almost the beach, isn't it? In some ways, it's that band.
I think you'll have to write my artist statement, Paul. Yeah.
My brain races off on this stuff. I get really excited at the metaphor and all those sorts. I think that's why I found myself kind of connected to the work, because it's, you know, it's great the way it sort of comes together. So you're working in an again back in an optimistic field, and you're working in a different way. So you've clearly pivoted a bit from your original intentions. Do you feel you could still work the other way, go back in a wholly planned thing, or are you just enjoying this too much?
I think I have done a little bit. Like I did a couple of images when we first went into lockdown for no particular reason. And yeah, some of them were quite meticulous, and, you know, you shoot however many 100 photos and, oh, that's the one. The water drop did what I wanted in that one particular image. And that was absolutely shades of the proximal orbit way of working. You know, it was just so frustrating, and, you know, go back and do it again, move the light an inch, you know, all of that jazz. So it's nice to know that I can still do that and still find it rewarding and not want to pull my hair out completely. But yeah, at the same time, I am really enjoying this. Yeah, like you said, being more of a curator of those images that reveal the things to me, you know, after they've been shot, without that immediacy is, I think it's pushing me as an artist, because I think, you know, you think you know whether something's a good shot when the first time you see it. And, you know, I'm going back through and going, oh, actually that's got potential. Or if I just bring those tones down and let that one thing shine a little bit more on its own, you know, it has a different meaning. And I like being challenged that way. Yeah.
Yeah, and working in such like the dark end of the spectrum of the light spectrum so much, do you struggle with rendering what you see into print? Does that bug you? What you're like, I thought I had detail there, you know?
Yeah, I think we're about to cross that bridge together, Paul. So when I have to print this series, I'm sure I'll be crying somewhere in the corner of Atkins about my details. Yeah.
I don't think we've struggled personally. I might speak to David, but I don't think we've had that. It seems to be you've got a bit of a handle on that.
Yeah, not yet. But I think I'm at that point now where I'm really pushing it. Like before it was like, no, my lighting, I'll fiddle with that. And now it's, I've already shot the work, you know, I've already shot this image. I'll never find this particular shell at the particular beach ever again. So I'm working with what I've got and I'll push it. So yeah, I'm sure I will find the limit this time, and yeah, have to, you know, swallow my pride and say, okay, that's what it is. Yeah. So I'm working in those spaces now, and yeah, wondering just how calibrated my screen is. So it's an adventure for when we can come back to the shop and
yeah. That's going to be super interesting to see that that sort of evolution of the work, and to see you working that way. I mean, I'd be surprised if it's a challenge. I mean, one of the things that I've noted, and I don't know whether it's a personal thing or it was the master of visual arts, whether that the professionalism with which you approach all those aspects of it. A lot of people go, oh yeah, I want to have an exhibition and I'm just going to, you know, these are my pictures. And you look at them, you go, where's the theme? Just to start with, I haven't even thought at that point. Can you talk a little bit about that sort of, that professionalism of planning a show and putting it together, and all those little things you gotta remember?
Yeah, I guess it's something that wasn't instant by any means. I started off, I think my first exhibition was one in Red Poles at in McLaren Vale. Thank you, Dana Kinter, for helping me out when I didn't have a clue. Yeah, let's ground this in. I once handed someone some work and forgot to put D-rings on it, and I did because I didn't know what they were, and I hadn't titled any of the work, even though I was clearly expected to do so. So everyone starts there, I think. So yeah, thanks, Dana. But yeah, I don't know. I just you put little bits in group shows, and then I think eventually you go, no, I want to control this narrative. And I think, yeah, I think because I'd been working on, well, I went from Awash, the one that you're talking about with the, responding to that loss, I think was the first solo exhibition that I did. And yeah, I guess it already had a really strong narrative or, concept behind it. So there was never really a conscious moment where I thought, okay, now I'm going to start working, exclusively in solo shows. And I think it almost was the chicken before the egg or whatever you want to call it. That because the work was so personal or, rooted in something that was, so important, you couldn't put that in a group show. Like you can't go and go, oh, here's my work about loss and it's next to someone's, work about, farts or something. You have to have control of that context. So I think that's where it came from. And, when I was making, and actually I will say there was a lot of opportunities that I could have gone for, but I didn't take because I think my work didn't suit it anyway. Like I have not really put stuff in cafes because a lot of my photographs had, dead foxes and things that didn't really suit that tone anyway. So that sort of narrowed my choices. But yeah, I think you want to control the narrative, you want to control the reaction. I think some of my work you could go, oh, that's funny. I don't want it to be funny. I want it to be serious. I want it to be that you know that you're going into a space to see the work and you go in there and you give it the reverence that I want you to give it. Only so much you can control that, but, you can set it up that way. So I think that's where it comes from. I take the work seriously and I'd love everyone else to. So if it means waiting 5 years to find the right gallery space, so be it.
That's so cool.
Yeah, I'm glad you think so.
No, I really do. It's that patience. Most photographers produce a lot of stuff and they're ready to hop onto the next thing, and they're just, I don't know, there seems to be a little bit of a impatience to get stuff and to be climbing the ladder and to be on with it. And I think about yourself and I think about Alice Blanche, and Alice will sit on something for years and she'll write about it, and she'll collect the work. She'll walk by herself for 2 weeks in the middle of nowhere and create stuff. And it's that slow consumption of the idea. I mean, you'd hope the idea is a good one to start with before you take 5 years to do it. But it is awesome. It produces a lot. So tell me, how much of that came out of getting a master's of visual art? Like, how helpful was that to you? Did that lay a foundation, or did it pick you up and push in the right direction, or, was it a waste of time? I know Mark Kimber doesn't listen to this stuff, so don't. You can say whatever you want.
Actually, no, Mark was my undergrad, and that was great. So he's safe anyway. Masters was like, I think it was the last year that you could put it on Hex. So yep. I think I might have taken a break or, done something else, but it was like, oh no, do it now. So I went straight from undergrad to a grad dip that you turn into a master's with an extra year. And I really value it for the fact that I just had to keep pushing what I had got to. And I think I had a great time in undergrad, finding all these tools. I found my, black tones, and I found my cold white light. And I think, sticking around for postgrad was like, no, keep pushing, keep going. What are you doing with these things? What's the story that you're telling? And some of the work originated, well, the concept for proximal orbit was, seeded in my postgrad study. And I think some of the works, are from 2014, and I exhibited them, or I presented them as part of my master's. But I wasn't like, I don't think it was fully refined there, that I didn't nail my master's. Like I got it, I passed, but it needed further refining. So maybe that's why it took 5 years. But yeah, it was definitely worth it for that push. And, what if I had just stopped and I just kind of fizzled out and, the work was half the, I don't know. Anyway, I don't want to think about that.
Like
but-
most of us end up doing, like I think it was the last two guests that said they're proud graduates of the school of I didn't finish it. But you did. That maybe it was the structure that you liked and the goal that it was imposed on you and the desire for completion that really pulled you through and got you to over those hurdles and those milestones, because it's a big thing, and it's a big thing to be prepared to take on a huge space and put something out into it, like Praxis and Felt to some extent, and all those spaces that you got it, and it's your blank canvas to go and tell the story, and that's like isn't that an artist's scariest thing in the world, the blank canvas?
Yeah, it is terrifying. Even I remember, Flinders Medical Centre, I had a really long corridor, and that was terrifying enough. Yeah, it is.
There's been a great history. I'm just going to the Flinders. You did an artist in residency at Flinders Medical. There's been a lot of interesting artists, like Matt Netheim was one of the first that I came across, and he ended up, was he working for Where the Wild Things Are? The film. I think he was.
Yeah, that's
cinematographer
great.
or director on that or something. So you've got like, it's a pretty important thing to get artist in residency. What does an artist in residency mean? How does that work?
I think they're all different, but that one was about, and actually it was quite unique because my dad worked in the department that I, was sort of shadowing. But it was a chance to respond to that environment. I mean, art and hospitals, they are, quite entrenched, but, on the surface, that's quite a strange pairing. But that was a great experience because I took that, idea of recreating something with completely different objects or seeing the image in a collection of things that were unrelated, and applied that by immersing myself in the medical imaging department across all the modalities. And that was just fascinating in itself because, I'd never seen like angiography, and all of these images were just really wild to me. And I have a little bit of newfound respect for my dad as a radiographer, who always says, oh, well, I work with images, so it makes sense that you work with images. Like, okay, sure, you can have that. So that was really fantastic. And I am really enjoyed that. It was challenging to try and be like, no, I'm going to recreate this x-ray of a knee and the snail will be the patella because it has to. And yeah, it was very laborious and intense. And I could tell you the story of, I went across town trying to find this particular leaf that had to play the role of the four chambers of the heart. It looks like a 4-leaf clover. Can't remember what it's called. So there was drama. There was, avidly combing gum tree, and it was super involved. And I think when I applied for the residency, I didn't quite anticipate how dramatic the whole thing would be. But yeah, I exhibited those works in the Promenade Gallery. Huge thanks to Arts and Health at FMC. They do fantastic work. And yeah, that was a great experience learning about, you speak of professionalism, what are my obligations and am I doing the right things? Also in a hospital, you've got to be really respectful of, privacy and, what role you're playing and are you being invasive at all? So it was nice to just be a fly on the wall and see lots of really stimulating visual things and respond to that. And I think the responses were interesting. Some people
they're cool.
Oh, they're nice. And it's like, oh, you haven't read the statement. So I'm happy for it to be a nice picture. And some people, you'd watch them, they'd walk along the corridor and go, oh yeah. And then they'd get to the last one and you'd see them twig that there was something else going on, and then they'd go back. And I think when I was there, I had someone go, what's this one? What's that meant to be? Is that a brain? Is that, so there was a lot of fun in people trying to decode or figure it out. Yeah.
Yeah. It's great because there's a lot of art that isn't accessible. And if you're going to be hanging it in a space like a hospital, which I know art as healing is always a thing that's discussed, but there's a lot of people who are just on hold in their life, and these corridors are just, they're awful things in some ways, where people just trolling up and down trying to get some stimulation. And I think artist in residency is great. So it gives you access to certain areas and departments, and they say you get introductions, obviously, and then permission to photograph in certain environments. Is that the case?
I think I had permission to do more than I actually felt comfortable doing. I didn't photograph anything on hospital grounds or, any goings on. I more sort of noted what kind of imagery I was looking at. Like, okay, this is a knee, or this is a brain, or this is a, ultrasound versus X-ray, all of those sort of things, and just tried to just sort of just be an observer first, and then let the ideas develop when I'd had the chance to sort of go away and think about them, and like, oh, which image really did stand out? Which ones am I still thinking about after I've gone home? And the images themselves were made at home in my spare room studio. So I think I was a little timid about, you are in a hospital, and yes, the residency exists and you're allowed to be there. But yeah, I probably could have let go a little bit more, but I was quite hesitant about, being in that space and, taking up anybody's time, because there's important life-saving work going on. So yes, it was interesting though.
I get that. I'm surprised that microscopy didn't grab you then. Cell level imagery is incredible.
The next one, definitely.
Is that? You can have a microscope set up in that spare room.
Yeah. Don't tempt me.
I know. It's a huge opportunity. Would you chase a residency again? Is that something you'd like to do again?
I think so, yeah, especially now that I've loosened up a bit with how I'm working, and sort of pulling images and, being a bit more creative about that process instead of shoot, is it good? Okay, it's in the collection. I think it would be interesting to go through a residency now with that sort of new way of working. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, Hayley Lane went to Antarctica. I think you should be on the International Space Station, all right? That's my vote.
I'll take it.
Just tell them to speak to me, and I'll write a nice letter for you, huh?
Oh, thank you, Paul. That'll do the trick, I'm sure.
All right, then. Well, I'm going to let you be, because I've taken up a wonderful hour, and it's been just absolutely charming and fantastic, and it's so great to hear, what goes inside your head and what you've done and what's influenced you. And I can't wait to see, I really want to see Minutes to Midnight, 2 Minutes to Midnight, because, that stuff scares the shit out of me. So I'd like a bit of being scared. And I think back to Trent Park's book and show Minutes to Midnight, which, is just, Mike, I just got a signed copy of it from Trent. And my daughters who are both art freaks, are like, oh my God, this stuff is just so amazing. So I can't wait to see your participation in the idea and that kind of stuff. So hopefully we get to see a show coming out late in the year. Do you think it might happen this year?
I think it might be next year, but when it comes, it'll be good, because we've had more time to reflect and refine our messaging and, all of that jazz, and maybe add to it. So we'll see. I'll let you know. You'll be the first to know. Let's put it that way.
Thank you so much. Well, look, congratulations on a fab career, and I just sit around and watch all you wonderful people make great stuff, and I just soak it up, and, it's my drug. So
we do it for you, Paul.
Yay. All right, then. We'll see you soon, Steph.
Thank you, Paul.
Bye. So welcome back, everybody, after a interview with Steph Fuller. What were your thoughts, Kate?
I think the thing that I should have said before the interview was played is that I think what's kind of magical about her work is the way, and that is very applicable to commercial. When I say commercial photographers, I mean non-fine art artist photographers. Is the way that she takes the mundane and makes it hyper real and makes it supernatural and makes it sort of mystical.
Yeah. Otherworldly.
Yeah, and that I think is what photographers all photographers try to do. They try to take those, like how many weddings are there a year?
Yeah.
50 million weddings.
And everybody is everybody. We're not.
Yeah.
We're not all models. We're not all.
Yeah. And there's only so
we're
many.
not, as in you and I are models.
Well, we're models. Obs. As the one viewer knows. That like there's so much. There are so many like weddings are the same everywhere in many respects, and families are the same everywhere in many respects, and yet photographers routinely are capable of finding these unique, wild, beautiful moments inside what could be viewed as mundane and sort of standard and boring. And I think that's what photographers do, and I think that's why they're so precious.
Yeah. No, you're spot on. And Steph is looking at little moments and little vignettes and little critters and all that, and that's what she's making something special and grand and giving them a stage to have the little plays on. Yeah,
and the series about the family member who suicided is just heartbreakingly beautiful.
It is, isn't it?
So she's a rock star, but you got a moment of something.
I have a moment of colour, and guess what you're wearing?
The correct colour.
The correct colour for what?
Woo! Thank you to H&M menswear department, which is frankly the only area of H&M you should be shopping in.
Why should we be shopping in H&M
because
menswear?
the H&M menswear department is so much better than the rest of H&M, which is all just plastic shit. H&M men's department, look at this. Cotton, pure cotton knit, $39. The sleeves are long enough for us lanky people. It's glory. I love it. I'm basically in menswear. I'm basically in drag 24/7.
Well, you look great.
I wear all menswear except my bras are not men's bras. Because they haven't invented good men's bras yet. But you know what? If men demanded bras tomorrow, you can damn well be sure they'd be amazing bras. And they'd be like in packs of 20 for $15. Meanwhile, shut up. Meanwhile, shut up. Do your moment of colour, dickhead.
Okay. I really like brown. I didn't realise how much I like brown.
Town.
But I was very excited because the most photographic of browns would be sepia, right?
Are you going to talk about drab?
No.
Well, fuck you sideways then.
Let's talk about sepia because sepia is really cool, right?
Yes.
But sepia was a colour originally derived from cuttlefish. And South Australia is kind of famous at Gulf for our little cuttlefish, which are strange little squiddy octopusy type of things with little tentacles, and they're very cute. And when you walk along the beach, you find these little, they're backboney things that you can give to your bird to sharpen its beak on. You know, right? Cuttlefish are gorgeous, but they squirting like squid and octopuses. Octopus do. They're squirting. And guess what? The ink they squirt is sepia.
Aww.
Yeah, so that has been harvested for that purpose.
Hang on, does that mean sepia is not vegan? Sepia is not vegan. Vegans.
Recipes
it's
and
black
methods.
or white or colour, you motherfuckers.
Recipes or methods of separating cephalods from their ink abound. So that's getting the ink out.
Now you're going to make all the vegans cry.
And a common procedure involves removing the sac, drying and powdering it, then boiling the extract with
the urine?
With a strong alkali, and that's not
Where's the urine?
To extract the pigment. Once neutralised, it could be washed, dried, and ground up and made into cakes.
Cakes?
Yeah, that's all those.
I made a great cake last night.
I know you
It was
did.
brown.
Yes, it was, but it was a chocolate brown. All the colours we've talked about the manufacturing of generally ends up as a little cake, which they then add terps or whatever to turn into the paint. Okay. So today, artists still value sepia ink for its red undertones. The word is more likely to be used in the context of photography. Originally, images were chemically toned to replace the silver in the silver-based prints with a more stable compound, making them last longer and bring them a symphony of warm ochres. Thank you, Cassia St. Clair. So that's our sepia. Now let's go on to a...
Are we going to talk about drab?
No. We're going to talk about mummy brown.
What? As in Egyptian?
Uh-huh.
Not as
Let
in
me read this.
I'm a mummy
No,
and I'm wearing brown.
No, let me read this. On 30th of July 1904, O'Hara and Hoare placed an unusual advertisement in the Daily Mail. What they wanted at a suitable price was an Egyptian mummy. It may appear strange to you, the notice read, but we require our mummy for making colour. And then to stave off any pricks of public conscience, they continued, surely a 2,000-year-old mummy of an Egyptian monarch might be used for adorning a noble fresco in Westminster Hall, or else without giving offence to the ghost of the departed gentleman or his descendants.
So they wanted a male mummy.
So ground up mummy or mumia was applied topically or mixed. So this is not just
Hang
for paint.
on.
This is not just for paint, right?
Hang the fuck on. Are you saying that people got dead bodies,
Yes.
which is what a mummy is?
Yes.
You can say it's a
Yes.
non-white body, but it's a dead body.
Let me keep going.
And they ground that shit up?
They were often mixed into drinks to swallow, and it seems almost nothing it could not cure. Pliny the Elder, you know, the old Pliny dude, recommended it as a toothpaste. Francis Bacon for staunching of blood, and Robert Boyle for bruises, and John Hall of Shakespeare's son-in-law fame used it as for a troubling case of epilepsy. So
That's outrageous.
so have a listen to this.
Cannibals.
Have a listen to this. There was also some debate as to which parts of the mummy were used to get the best and the richest browns. This is to use mummy as a paint. Recommended for translucent glazing layers for shadows and skin tones. Some suggested using the muscle in the flesh, while others thought that the bones and bandages could also be ground up to get the
Unacceptable.
best out of a charming pigment.
Unacceptable.
However, listen to this. This is the part that will sock your knocks off. Right? Knock your socks off. By the beginning of the 20th century, demand was so sluggish that a single mummy might provide paint manufacturers with pigment for a decade or more. C. Robertson, a London art shop that first opened its doors in 1810, finally ran out of mummy in 1960s.
Stop it.
We might have a few odd limbs lying around somewhere, he told the managing director of Time magazine in October 64, but not enough to make any more paint. We saw our last complete mummy some years ago, I think, for £3. Probably we shouldn't have. We certainly can't get it anymore. Okay. How is that?
People have issues with brown.
And the last one.
Okay. Is it poo related?
Nope.
Oh, how have you managed to get through this without one poo joke?
No. You know what? It's Torp related. Torp.
Sure.
And it's kind of references us a bit because colour science is a really important thing we've worked on. And there's an American scientist called Munsell who defined colour in a kind of a 3D graph, defined the colour spectrum and the paint and pigment colours and all that kind of stuff in a 3D graph. There was a Brit who was working a little after him, but Munsell was one of the first. And interestingly enough, there's some people who were working on the work of BCC afterwards, Mayers and Paul.
I've sensed some reading.
They'd laboured over this task for years, but one colour that vexed both sets of researchers was taupe. It actually a French word meaning mole, as in not as in molly, mole, but as in a little creature that goes into the ground.
Okay.
Was a broad consensus. A deep grey on the cold side. Taupe was all over the place. The only thing consistently agreed upon that it was generally browner than a mole might have the right to be. The British Colour Council's assumption was that the confusion was due to ignorant English speakers not realising that taupe and mole were different words for the same thing, because mole is French for, taupe is French for the mole, okay?
Okay.
Mayers and Paul were on a rather more thorough. They set out on an expedition around the zoological museums of the United States and France to look at foreign specimens of the genus Talpa and determine which was the logical reason for using both terms. So they tried to work out what was actually the mole and what colour was the mole, so what colour was actually taupe. And they ended up settling on.
Did they just kill
taupe.
a bunch of moles?
I don't think they killed them.
not
They
in
just
the
looked
mic.
at the colour. We're not killing them. So there you go. That's your moments of colour. Thank you, Cassia St. Clair. The
Molly
Mummy Brown.
moments of colour.
How good was the moments of brown? The moments of colour
I can't
brown.
believe how disgusting humans are.
I know. Grinding up mummies.
That's
Crazy.
That's wrong town.
It's a good story, and I've actually I would highly recommend anyone read it because there was a few other stories in the Brown, including Khaki, which I found very interesting.
And no drab.
No, they didn't
Look
talk
drab
about
up.
but they might do Under the Olive when we get around to that. You never know.
I don't know.
Anyhow,
more neutral
people,
than Olive,
shall we
if you
wave
ask
these
me.
lovely people off?
Yeah, I gotta go to bed. I can't though, because I gotta edit this shit, put it up on the interwebs, and have it all.
It's Saturday afternoon again, isn't it?
What's wrong with us? This week's been a nightmare.
All right then.
Okay, love
Bye.
you. Bye.